3, 2, and 1. A couple of things all teams must consider in this debate. First of all, how would developing nations benefit from either corporate ownership or collective farming? And what is actually the best interest of the farmers themselves? Because we believe that on OO, we're the only side that takes these issues seriously and is actually willing to take the trade-off. So if we're coming to this debate, we'll move straight into the rebuilding and responses for OG. First of all, our leader of opposition talks about how farmers have control over their land, which is like the biggest benefit coming from OO, but we haven't really heard engagement from on their side how farmers actively have control over their job as a farmer or have a community base around them. What this means is that they will have this thing called upward mobility, right? The ability to move forward in your career. They will have incentives to work harder, make the business succeed, and build a better community, and this will also in turn make farmers work together. And we believe that there are farmers everywhere in the place where we live. For example, in urban areas in Vietnam, for example, it's extremely common for farmers who work together, not under any corporations, to maintain their own land and work as a community. Not only will this strengthen the farm industry in developing nations, but this will also create a community where people actively have control over their land and work efficiently afterwards. Even though OG may make claims about weather or climate issues, we believe that even if it is true, because they're still farmers after all, so they still have control over their land and know what to do efficiently. We will also give rebuttals to this later on, and we'll also deepen our case by bringing up the argument on the likelihood of success for corporate ownership in developing nations. But first of all, let's come to responses, because OG talks a lot about how farmers will be unstable with low income on our side, the house, but we're so curious on why the same thing will not happen to them either, because there's no guarantee that farmers will not be exploited with low wages under their side of the house. What our side has that their side doesn't is that farmers have control over their land. They work with other farmers with the same direction and movement. They also talks about how our farmers will still sell at surprisingly high prices and corporations are more strategic. However, even if this is true, at least they are still profiting from this altogether. They're still making profits, and the money goes into other business so that farmers will hire people from their locals as well, and they will even make it their own mini businesses. So this will even maximize the local economy in developing nations. However, on their side, what happens is that when a corporation they sells the land, they sells it to other corporations. So the community in developing nations are left without that much of that influx of money overall. So at the end, this still benefits the corporations altogether, and little can be done to developing nations, because this notion is all about developing nations, how they will be benefited overall. Also, OG brings up a case on how this will utilize the land and this will give farmers more knowledge. However, this is simply false and flawed, because most corporations, they don't have any intention to actually train local farmers at all. They just hire workers, not partners, and they just hire those farmers to work under them. And their aim is to be more powerful by exploiting the farmers in these regions. And even if training does happen, it's basically very limited. For example, they will just basically tell you how to grow how to grow crops efficiently, and there's not much training being done, so we don't see how training will be so effective in this case, because farmers, they know what to do, and they even have more knowledge when it comes to the CEOs of these corporations altogether. And one more thing I'd like to note is that collective farmings, they are deeply tied to land, so farmers basically they know what they're doing, and in collective farming, peer-to-peer learning does happen, which means that farmers, they will help one another train both the local people, and they will also get help from other states as well. So overall, this is way better than corporations. But moving to our argument in this debate, we're going to bring up the likelihood of success for corporate ownership, because OG can say all they want about how farmers in developing nations under corporate ownership will be safer, will be more stable, or will receive more income. However, corporations, they are less dedicated to watching over farmland. They may be based in cities, but they are based in cities, but they have and they also have different interests, for example, foreign investment or other projects in which they're working on. So their main goal is not 100% to the farmland itself. And cooperation with money will just hire farmers. They don't have the same direction as farmers do. And it's important to note that farming is deeply tied, as we have said before, to the land, to the local ecosystems and cultural practices. So the point that OG said about how if the weather is bad and your truck or anything of your tools will no longer work, and like cooperations, they're more strategic. We don't think this is like a very important thing to consider in this debate, because farmers, they know what they're doing. They have been doing this literally for their entire lives for survival, which means that they have very decent, if not better, knowledge on like the climate, the land, and the place they're living in. So oftentimes it's pretty obvious that the locals will know about their community more than a foreigner. And most likely they will use traditional, sustainable techniques rather than industrial ones, which industrial ones are mostly used by corporation and is detrimentally harmful. The impact of this is pretty obvious, because on our side, we respect the culture and we are able to reduce the environmental problems on our side of the house. And also, farmers, they actively work together to achieve the same goal, and this takes time rather than just work for the corporations, brings you no benefits and even exploit you. So why is this instantly better? Because on our side, we ask a very simple question: why would this benefit developing nations? Because it's important to note that state-owned income is important. The economy doesn't boom that much, and when farmers, they have like control over this, when it's collective farming, then they can branch out and become food producers and even hire the locals. Cooperation, however, have foreign interests, and they're likely to have other projects to work on. Collective farming, however, gives farmers the opportunity to maximize profit for the countries, and other side, they may talk about how this will ensure the food supply and it's not gonna be less. However, we believe that this food is often for export, not for local use, which we believe that food security here is very important, and on our side, we are able to maximize this if we incorporate collective farming in developing nations. Very proud to oppose.